we can change the behaviors that are causing the problem.
I think that this government has got the environmental conscience of Attila the Hun.
I will not accept a plan that'll harm our economy and hurt American workers.
We are in a battle for a future for our children and grandchildren.
Decades of debate, while oil continues to burn. Environmental movements, lawsuits, conferences, agreements, as we continue to damage our atmosphere.
This is an ongoing experiment of which we are all a part, like it or not.
It's an engineering project that would literally touch every living thing on the planet.
They're looking at ways to reflect sunlight back into space and cool down the Earth.
The technical term for manipulating the climate is geoengineering. It's a growing field. In fact, it's growing beyond the scientific laboratories and into other areas like policy and law. And some of the biggest players are right here in North America. Now, one of the more controversial streams of this is called solar radiation management, or solar geoengineering. And before we understand the impacts this technology might have on our entire planet, we need to understand how it works and just how big the stakes really are.
You can spray something into the atmosphere to change.
Spray pollution into the atmosphere to stop it warming.
So in the end, pollution saved them all.
We are virtually under assault right now. It's not alarmism, it's not exaggeration. This type of weather modification puts out chemicals and toxins, some known, some not known. Many people who try to debate this issue, if they ask you why they should believe this is going on, we have film of it happening, end of the argument. That's it. There's no debate, no discussion, this is not speculation. When we have films that we can clearly see are spraying, there's no denying that jet is spraying, period. But the bottom line is, that's not a condensation trail. Any notion that it is simply denial or complete ignorance.
How do you get 1 million tons of sulfur up into the highest reaches of our atmosphere?
So that turns out probably not to be that hard. So first of all, let's put 1 million tons in context. So the world now dumps about 50 million tons of sulfur into the lower atmosphere as a pollutant, and it kills several million people a year. So that's the scale of the way we're already altering the global sulfur cycle by air pollution, burning fossil fuels.
There's potential for catastrophic weather events on a global scale.
What the?
Yo, that's hard.
What is that? 4 minutes and it's already freezing cold. And it just hit. It's like snowing.
Solar flare could unleash nuclear holocaust across planet Earth, forcing hundreds of nuclear power plants into total meltdowns. This is also very important. This is relating back to the pharmaceutical cure for planet Earth. The more they spray, the more they have to spray. As they destroy the ozone layer, they destroy the Earth's natural protection. Now, if we have a large CME, a large solar flare, we may have Fukushima times 100 or 200, because solar flares can knock out grid power, no grid power, nuke plants can't cool themselves, they go into meltdown. So the more they spray, the more they, I think, feel they have to spray to provide protection. Where we once had natural protection, now we have to have toxic metal artificial protection. So this is one more way that geoengineering could end life on Earth.
What if you discovered a way to cool down the planet? Extreme weather events are becoming more common and more ferocious. As the surface temperature of the Earth continues to rise, so too will the ferocity of natural disasters.
What are your concerns?
Well, there's so many uncertainties with it. It assumes a knowledge of how our planet works that we don't have. Just think that what would happen if, in the middle of blowing sulfates into the stratosphere, that we discover a volcano erupts like it did in Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines in 1991.
Another moderate earthquake and eruption shaken the summit near Kilauea. That 5.4 magnitude quake happened at about 3:40 this morning. Again, no tsunami was generated, but more ash was let into the air, adding to building concerns over fog.
We'd suddenly find ourselves not with a temperature decline that we thought we could manage of 2 degrees perhaps, but perhaps a decline of 4 degrees, which could be disastrous for us. So we're learning these things about our planet all the time, and the biology of the planet, the structure of the planet, And to try to do these kinds of huge planetary adjustments without that knowledge is quite scary.
The idea is to scatter the particles high in the stratosphere, supposedly out of harm's reach, using a fleet of high-altitude aircraft at a cost of a few $1 billion a year. Lots of sunlight would still get through, but through a controlled quantity, it could reflect just enough to alter global temperatures. The concept has been proven to work by Mother Nature, with massive volcanoes that have injected sulfur particles into the atmosphere and actually temporarily decreased global temperatures. But the bigger question is, can we do it without negative impacts?
When you see a map that's that imbalanced, it should be a red flag. That can't be created naturally, where you have half the country frying and another half below normal temperatures. So the darker colors are various stages above normal, the middle being maybe 20 degrees above normal. You throw a rock and you're in below normal temperatures. This is a recent GIS map. Now, this is important to look at this map. As you see the blue colors over Canada and the eastern US, that's where heavy geoengineering is occurring. Geoengineering can and does cool massive regions temporarily at the cost of making the overall warming worse. Geoengineering, on the shredding of the ozone layer, we've been told it was hairspray cans. Now, I ask you, what's more logical? Is it hairspray cans or military tankers dumping 100 tons at a shot up there, flying 24/7? They've been at this since at least the late 40s. We've been given a lot of red herrings as reasons for things that are happening. CFCs are bad for the atmosphere, but the geoengineering appears to be the largest causal factor, so the UV penetrates deeper into the ocean, kills the plankton stocks die, oxygen content goes down, fish stocks die. You can see how everything is connected.
Insurers say the number of weather-related disasters has quadrupled since 1970. While world leaders are debating and disputing climate change and the ways in which humans alter their behavior on Earth, some scientists discuss changes to the Earth itself.
The blue graph you see is ocean heat content compared to atmospheric heat. A cubic meter of seawater holds 4,000 times the thermal energy of a cubic meter of air. So it doesn't matter what they do geoengineering-wise. They can cool off temperatures at the surface. It means nothing compared to what's happening in the oceans. The oceans are warming extremely rapidly. Can't hide that for very long. Bottom line is ocean heat building up extremely rapidly. This is ocean heat content as well. You see the graph go straight.
This conversation is too important, potentially too dangerous to leave to just the scientific community. These technologies have planetary-wide impacts. They will affect not just our generation, but generations to come for hundreds of years. This is a global conversation. It's an intergenerational conversation. We are still very, very far from where we need to be in terms of reducing global emissions and keeping our planet at a safe level, under 2 degrees or even 1.5 degrees. The gap there is enormous and very, very worrying.
Plankton, the base of ocean food web, in big decline. There's a lot of ways to cool populations. When populations don't have anything to eat, they tend to die off. And right now, plankton stocks globally are about 50% declined. Plankton produces 50 to 60% of Earth's oxygen supply. Media is not reporting on this. No plankton, no fish. We had the anchovy fleet returned to the Pacific Northwest with no fish, zero, this last fall. So the food chain is breaking down right now. We're seeing marine life wash up on the shores of Western North America, now in Texas. Some of this may be related to Fukushima radiation, but I think at this point still the majority related to a food chain that's collapsing. The bees, what about the bees? Is it farm chemicals? If it's farm chemicals, why are the bees just as dead 1,000 miles into the wilderness? Try to tell people this that are in the bee community. I've tried. Most won't listen. I've talked to some of the head people in the country. They want to stay in their cocoons. They've been taught and trained that unless it says in their peer-reviewed, establishment-approved manual that there's something going on in our skies, then it literally doesn't exist in their reality. The bee collapse disorder appears to be most directly related to geoengineering and the radio frequency signals.
It almost seems like an end-of-pipe solution, though, that it would be more sensible to focus on going back to the source of the problem.
That's exactly the right question, because you're using some manipulation, some pollution to fight some other pollution. And the right question is, why on earth shouldn't we just stop putting CO2 out? The long run answer is, of course, yes. In the long run, if we want to deal with the climate problem, we must bring global carbon emissions to zero. So in my view, solar geoengineering can never be a substitute for cutting emissions.
You are introducing something into the environment that wasn't there naturally. There will be side effects. The question is, can we understand how big or small they are? There are a number of highly respected scientists who say that experiments on solar geoengineering should not be done.
There's no chance that anybody with a high double-digit IQ doesn't know what's going on up there. And I've talked to a lot of people from academia. I know a lot of them. A lot of them know, and they're scared. They're very scared. I had NOAA scientists a year and a half ago tell me off the record they're, quote, alarmed as hell. They don't know what to do about it because they have no First Amendment protection. So any notion that geoengineering can save the planet, we already know the answer. Geoengineering is killing the planet. The population bomb threatens the peace of the world. So what are we doing about it? This is something you'd expect the global elite to say. And I say if we're going to cut population, we should start with them. Their motto, the Eugenics, the foundation of globalists. It's always been the case. We have David Rockefeller on the record stating that 95% of the population needs to go. And a lot of people have never seen these quotes, but they exist. So it should not be hard to connect the dots here. And at this point, we are all not only expendable to them, but we are a liability to them. This is how HAARP is affecting the global meltdown, HAARP and geoengineering. These are ocean currents. We now have warm Atlantic water being pumped into the Arctic. That's thawing methane on the sea floor. Methane's releasing. Methane goes into the atmosphere, covers the planet like a layer of glass, begins to heat things up fast. Methane, over a 10-year time horizon, is 100 times more powerful than CO2 as a greenhouse gas. Again, all roads, so many roads leading back to geoengineering. Not to say that we don't have a problem otherwise. Not to say that human activity isn't a form of geoengineering, as I said. But geoengineering is like trying to put a fire out with a bucket of gas. So you have jet stream manipulation that pushes Arctic air down. You see even the Arctic is much warmer than Canada and the eastern US. So they can cool regions, make a lot of headlines. What's the real picture? That's the real picture. Global temperature records. Again, no downward trend there. Another GIS map, ocean temperatures, everything far above normal overall. If you look through the headlines and you start looking at global news, you'll find out it's a very different picture than our media is painting. And this is important to remember. Did the media originally paint the picture of global warming? Yes. Did they have an agenda for that? To saddle us with taxes and all sorts of burdens? Yes, they did. But now I think things have gone so far, they have definitely changed directions.